On this edition of Good Day DePaul students protest delays in MAP grants.
Student loans, they're vital to many at the university, but they're also a big source of anxiety.
And building female self-esteem. It's one way to counter online emotional abuse.
I'm Savannah Fish.
And I'm Eleanor Lyon. And this is Good Day DePaul. And a Red Line ride reportedly ended in a sexual assault for a Loyola University student. The incident occurred on December 1st around 10:30 p.m. The student says she was walking in the 6300 block of North Winthrop when she was approached by a man who she says assaulted her. Police say the attacker was described as a 30 to 40-year-old man with a medium build, wearing a white hat, dark jacket, and white Nike gym shoes. A class action lawsuit against Jimmy John's claims that the sandwich shop is not paying their employees what they are legally required to. In Chicago, the minimum hourly wage a company must pay employees is $10. Furthermore, the U.S. Department of Labor says employees must receive 1 1/2 of regular pay for working more than 40 hours in 1 week. Jimmy John's payment policy means employees earn below minimum wage. The restaurant chain is able to do this because of a loophole in the law involving job titles. Jimmy John's promotes certain employees to an assistant store manager position so that they can pay these employees a weekly salary. Because these employees receive a salary, they are exempt from the laws governing work hours and overtime. Myron M. Cherry and Associates represents the plaintiffs in the case. The firm's founder, Myron Cherry, is acting as counsel.
Jimmy John's has taken a bankrupt version of the law in order to take advantage of people who wouldn't otherwise be able to defend themselves.
The average salary for assistant store managers is $500 a week. Most of these employees work as much as 60 hours a week. Basic math shows that Jimmy John's pays these people below Chicago's minimum wage. J.C. Zollner is the attorney who filed the case.
They've gone out and hired typically or predominantly young, inexperienced people, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. Jimmy John's had used this kind of sleight of hand by calling them an assistant store manager when in reality they're nothing more than a glorified sandwich maker.
Christina Slider says she has been a regular customer at Jimmy John's for years and thinks Jimmy John's is wrong for using this practice.
Hopefully the employees understand what's happening to them.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I know you go to work and you just trust that your job's paying you the right way.
Zollner says this situation of companies using loopholes to avoid paying their employees minimum wage is actually a common occurrence. One of his co-counsel members filed a similar case against CVS and settled for about $30 million. The lawsuit against Jimmy John's is waiting to go before a judge, but one question still remains unanswered.
The question is, would you eat a sandwich there if that's the way they operate?
With Good Day DePaul, I'm Eleanor Lyon. Over the holiday break, while many of us were relaxing and celebrating, protesters took to the streets of Chicago. The issue? The police shooting of African-American residents. And as I found out, it's a controversy that's impacted the entire city, including DePaul. The Black Lives Matter movement began in 2013 with a post on Twitter after George Zimmerman's acquittal in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin, a black 17-year-old in Florida. Since then, the movement has come closer to home for DePaul students. Police officers across the country are facing criticism and protests for their excessive use of force and killings of black men. But Nicole Bean, president of the DePaul College Republicans, feels many police officers are doing their jobs responsibly.
For right now, I think there's a lot of good cops, just like there's a few bad Muslims, there's a few bad Christians, there's a few bad doctors, there's also a few bad cops.
The latest protests in Chicago have centered around the killing of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald in October 2014 and the combined killing of 19-year-old Quintonio LaGreer and 55-year-old Betty Jones this past December. This is the 4100 block of South Pulaski, where Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke fatally shot 17-year-old Laquan McDonald 16 times. It took 13 months for the city to release this dash cam video from another officer's car, showing Van Dyke arriving on scene and drawing his gun. Within seconds, Van Dyke fires the first shot at McDonald and continues to shoot the teenager after he falls to the ground. Following the release of the video, protesters took to the streets, calling for change. DePaul student Michaela Ziegler was part of these protests.
So that was really moving for me because it was like, for the most part, I read about police brutality in tweets and in the news, but here I was like several feet from someone who had experienced it firsthand.
DePaul student Edward Ward has been active in the Black Lives Matter movement and has helped organize some of the demonstrations. Ward feels the protests need to have significant impact. For example, when demonstrators interrupted Black Friday shopping on Michigan Avenue.
Okay, and so when you cost them money, then you get their attention.
But Bean feels the Black Friday protests were inappropriate.
But when you start interfering with other people's lives and making them late for work, making them miss their flight, not allowing them to shop for their relatives during the Christmas time, that's not okay.
DePaul history professor James Wolfinger says he understands why the protesters are resorting to certain tactics.
Sometimes their tactics are very flamboyant, they are very controversial and confrontational, and sometimes you have to be confrontational to get people's attention.
In December, Mayor Emanuel apologized to the city after the release of the dash cam video.
But if we're also going to begin the healing process, the first step in that journey is my step, and I'm sorry.
Despite this apology and the mayor's call for healing and change, still another fatal police shooting occurred the day after Christmas. Officer Robert Rialmo fatally shot Quintonio LeGrier 6 times and accidentally killed Betty Jones. LeGrier had been home from Northern Illinois University for the holidays, and police were responding to a domestic disturbance between him and his father. LeGrier reportedly had a baseball bat, but no gun. Jones was a neighbor in the building and was shot upon answering the door. This is New Mount Pilgrim Baptist Church, where the families of Jones and LeGrier held services for the two after their deaths. Following Jones's death, Ward reached out to her family and visited their home. He took pictures of the blood and a bullet hole in the wall.
Oftentimes I hear it's the nature of the beast. Well, this is a beast that needs to be put down. Racism was ingrained in American culture, in America, the fabric of America. Without racism, America wouldn't be America.
I want my daughter to be safe, and I want to put myself in the shoes of other parents who have a different racial background, and to say that my kid would be safe no matter what color he is or she is.
This crisis has brought the issue of police shootings to the forefront and created greater awareness of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Black Lives Matter!
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
I'm just going to give the typical all lives matter.
The reason I love the Black Lives Matter movement so far is because it names the issue. For far too long, we've been kept from the table, and now we want a seat at the table. And even if you don't give us a seat at the table, we want our own table, because for far too long, we've been fed your crumbs.
For Good Day DePaul, I'm Eleanor Lyon. The DePaul community recently celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. For the first time, the university shut down in observance of the holiday. The ceremony started with the annual MLK prayer breakfast. It included freelance journalist and hip-hop activist Rosa Clemente, who was also the keynote speaker. Now, a status report on MAP grants. Those go to Illinois residents with financial need who attend Illinois colleges, but the grants have been suspended to a continuing disagreement between the Illinois legislature and Governor Bruce Rauner. Recently, the legislature approved new funding for MAP grants, but Governor Rauner is threatening to veto it. He says there's no money to pay for the grants. Instead, he wants to reduce funding for Illinois state colleges and universities and then fully fund MAP grants. DePaul President Father Dennis Holtschneider is urging the DePaul community to call the governor's office and urge him to reconsider his position. If the state does not fund the MAP grants, DePaul will reimburse students for the money they would be losing. Earlier, we reported on Governor Rauner vetoing the MAP grant bill. But what does that mean for the future? How will all this impact students who need the grants? I talked to a wide variety of people at DePaul about the issue.
I feel like when you start taking from the future, when you start taking from college students, from kids in CPS, that's where you really run into a problem, because that really should be the last thing to suffer.
Emma Gonzalez is a senior at DePaul University. To help pay for her education, Emma relies partly on money from the state's Monetary Awards Program grants, otherwise known as MAP grants. But funding the rest of her expenses is a family effort between Emma and her mother, Anna Gonzalez.
We have never gotten exactly all the money that we need in any of these 4 years, so we've covered it ourselves.
So I work 3 jobs to kind of help balance my finances, but To me, those things are investments in my future and experience and whatnot. So I have 2 jobs at DePaul, one at the Office of Health Promotion and Wellness and one at the Center for Identity, Inclusion, and Social Change. I work between 17 to 25 hours each week, and then twice a month I sit on the Youth Leadership Council for the Illinois Caucus for Adolescent Health.
Emma also receives a combination of scholarships, grants, and loans to pay her tuition. Illinois college students who demonstrate a financial need can receive MAP grants to fund their education. These grants do not need to be paid back. However, Illinois' current budget impasse means that more than 125,000 college students in Illinois are not receiving their MAP money.
On July 1st, the state was supposed to have its budget in place, and now we're almost at February, they still haven't passed that budget. So these grants have been held in limbo.
Many Illinois colleges and universities funded their students' MAP grants in the fall, but were not able to continue that funding into the new year. As a result, over 1,000 college students across Illinois did not return to classes.
I really don't think it's my place to judge another student's decision, considering that my mom does help me out, considering that I do get child support from my father. Even though I do work a lot of jobs, I still have people to pick me up when I'm down.
DePaul University made the decision to continue to fund its MAP grant students until the state can take over again. Like the other institutions that fronted the costs at one point or another, DePaul is hoping the state will refund that money once a budget is passed.
Again, it would be nice if the state ultimately pays us, and we expect that they will, but we didn't want anyone to put their education on hold waiting for the politicians to figure this out.
State Senator Heather Staines, a Chicago Democrat, is working with her fellow legislators to pass a budget that would provide money for MAP grants.
If we get a budget, the MAP grants will almost assuredly be included in the funding. It's a question of getting through this impasse and getting a budget. I think it's really hard to predict right now.
Staines cannot imagine Illinois college students going another year without MAP funding. But then again, no one thought the budget impasse would go this long either. In the event that the impasse does continue, DePaul has agreed to fund the MAP grants next year for all current students, as well as incoming freshmen and transfer students. At DePaul, about 5,000 students receive about $20 million worth of MAP grants.
Now, it's important to realize that across the state, there's about 130,000 students that get this grant. And the total amount of money that the state spends each year is about $370 million. So DePaul gets a good share of that because we enroll a lot of these students.
DePaul's Student Government Association, or SGA, has led a campaign this past year in support of MAP grants.
Since I've been here, MAP has been an extreme staple for SGA's initiatives. It kind of aligns with our educational accessibility initiative for this specific year, but we've always done a MAP campaign, and that has always included students filling out these postcards, which are sent to Springfield in the springtime when we lobby for the funding for MAP for the upcoming year.
Universities across Illinois fear the lack of funding for MAP grants will lead to dramatically lower enrollments.
They believe that if we don't solve this and solve this soon, they're absolutely going to see a change in enrollment for next year, and kids are going to go elsewhere.
Staines is concerned that more Illinois students may start going out of state for school. For now, DePaul University President, the Reverend Dennis Holtschneider, promised to fund MAP grant money as long as students stay in school.
Father Holtschneider has made this very clear. We're going to do whatever we can to keep these students enrolled. We are DePaul University, so that's a really big thing for us, is to serve these lower income students. We want them to have as good an education as any other person is entitled to.
I think it really falls in line with our Vincentian mission and the values we teach. You know, the question is like, what must be done, and we're doing what must be done.
Catavillo says even though DePaul students are receiving their grants, she can still imagine long-term consequences for all students.
While some individuals might think that this just affects MAP students, it really does affect the culture that we have here, the type of students that we have here, because without MAP, we could potentially increase tuition, not just for the students who don't receive MAP, but for all the students who attend DePaul.
Well, I think MAP grants are critical. You know, we have a growing college affordability problem.
Anna worries about her daughter, especially because Emma plans on going to graduate school, which would cost more money and require more loans. But while she does worry about her daughter, she is also concerned for others.
I worry about kids in the future.
And Illinois lawmakers will have to start worrying about the future too. They might still be arguing about the 2016 budget, but the deadline for the 2017 budget is fast approaching. With Good Day DePaul, I'm Eleanor Lyon. In Springfield, the budget stalemate continues between Republican Governor Bruce Rauner and the Democratic-controlled state legislature, and that crisis is now impacting Illinois state colleges. For example, Chicago State University says that unless it starts getting money from the state, it won't be able to pay its employees come March. And the president of Northern Illinois University says that school may have to shut down without state money soon. So far, no end in sight to the stalemate. A new policy is now in effect for DePaul students who are so-called gender non-conforming. It allows these students to choose a preferred first name and also indicate their gender through Campus Connect. Their designated name will appear in university-related systems and documents such as class rosters and D2L. DePaul's theater school is known throughout the country for its excellence. Recently, I had a chance to go behind the scenes during one of their productions to see how everything comes together.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're now about 15 minutes from top of show. Once again, 15 minutes from top of show. Thank you.
The theater school at DePaul gives students hands-on experience working on shows. Anna Abels is the school's director of marketing and public relations.
We do have advisors who are faculty members that help those students along the way and guide them when needed, and they have a lot of freedom.
At the Merle Reskin Theater, DePaul students run the show from start to finish, from onstage to backstage.
Each major program has a very succinct and specific trajectory of learning, so they kind of know, once they're applied and accepted into the theater school, what their 4 years is going to look like.
All freshmen are required to work as crew members on their first show. As students move along in their major, they take on larger roles, like Jackson Walsh, a senior who's worked as stage manager for the production of Prospero's Storm.
I would say that the stage management department in the theater school itself is a very central point. We know everybody at the theater school because we work with all of them in some fashion, which is very cool. It's part of the reason why I love it so much.
Production here can start as much as 1 year before the show makes it to stage.
They've been working on Prospero's Storm since before the school year even started.
As stage manager, Walsh was one of the first students working on Prospero's Storm.
I guess I originally came onto the production about February or March of last year, so about a year ago now.
So the stage manager starts right away with that. We run all of the production meetings, we run the design meetings.
Then the design teams come in. In this case, one of the main characters, Ariel, was portrayed on stage as a puppet. Junior Angela McIlvain and sophomore Frankie Charles helped create Ariel. The team says they were surprised to be working on puppets.
I thought I was going to be doing props, so I was picturing okay, I'll make some fake food, I'll stain a chair, and then as the course of the meetings went further, I was like, oh, this is a puppet designing position. And
McIlvain describes herself as the design element of the team, while Charles focuses on construction.
So building these puppets was a challenge because there was a lot of in-process sort of figuring out how to do things.
An actor then came in to bring Ariel to life. Senior Gail Tierney took on the role and says there was a learning curve to working with puppets.
When you're a puppeteer, you're blind just to everything because you have to look at the back of the puppet's head. So I was running into stuff all the time. I feel like I've gotten puppet buff, if that makes sense. The muscles that I use to hold Ariel are toned now.
The students say that from design to execution, puppeteering is hard work. So the theater school brought in Blair Thomas, a puppet specialist, to work with the students.
Because we're in such a rich theater city, we often bring in experts and professionals to come in and teach certain skills, whether it be fight skills or puppetry, or we also brought in a magician for this show.
And we basically have puppet boot camp on, I think it was Wednesdays.
Producing a show is a process for the students, especially since they also have to go to classes and study, and in some cases work at outside jobs, but most love what they're doing.
I tell people that are watching me work this hard all the time that I feel so prepared to be in the world though. Yeah. If this is how hard I can work and not get paid for it
and have to pay for it
yeah, I feel incredibly prepared to join the real world.
You do also get a lot of hands-on experience working on a show or many shows. Like I said earlier, I've done 3 shows per year since I've been here.
Abels says that hard work pays off after graduation.
You can see our alums in pretty much any theater in Chicago on any given day.
As seniors Tierney and Walsh will become DePaul alumni come June.
Yeah, I definitely plan to stay in Chicago. We are set up, I mean, they make so many good connections with people in the city.
Cirque du Soleil is a company that I really admire and really ultimately would like to work for because I believe in their artistic vision.
Tickets for shows at the theater school are only $10, making them affordable for students. They can do the work, and all you have to do is sit back and enjoy the show. For Good Day DePaul, I'm Eleanor Lyon. A unique exhibit has opened at the DePaul Art Museum. It's called Split Complementary and features installations, sculptures, books, and wall art by Diana Frid and Richard Rezac. It also includes rare books from the Special Collections Department of DePaul's John T. Richard Library and a variety of objects from the museum's permanent collection. The exhibit will run until April 24th. It's been an ongoing dispute between Illinois' Republican Governor Bruce Rauner and the Democratic-controlled state legislature, and it's led to gridlocks in many areas of state government, including budgeting. Some of the victims of all this are the state's public universities. I traveled to one of those schools, Chicago State, to find out just how severe the impact may be. The Illinois state budget stalemate has been hard on many public institutions. One of them, Chicago State University, is facing a crisis, and administrators like Dr. David Canis are working to find a solution.
We are a public institution. Our budget is based upon the fact that the taxpayers of the state of Illinois will provide part of the funding for our students to attend college.
But all this is being held up in Springfield. Governor Rauner is demanding changes, including measures to weaken unions. The Democratic-controlled legislature opposes that agenda. Chris Bury is a network news reporter and DePaul professor.
The governor wants these great big reforms. The Democrats want to concentrate just on the budget items, and that's where the two sides can't seem to agree.
Because of the lack of state funding, Chicago State is missing close to $35 million out of a $79 million budget for this academic year.
That's caused us a few problems, and thus we and the other state universities in Illinois, public universities in Illinois, are in a pretty difficult situation right now.
Some news reports have said that without money from the state, the university would not have enough money to operate and would have to close its doors come March. But Chicago State President Dr. Thomas Calhoun says that will not happen.
We're trying not to necessarily have any specific doomsday, if you will. Our university will not close.
Chicago State University is looking at budget cuts and other funding options to keep its doors open for the students. For instance, the school cut its travel expenses, plus a few employees retired, and the university will not be filling those positions. Canis says more cutbacks may still be necessary, such as larger class sizes.
But we may be only a part of what we were last year, depending upon what the state decides.
Calhoun, who took over the presidency in January, recognizes that he walked into this position at a difficult time.
To be honest with you, I wouldn't have preferred to come into this kind of budget problem. There's no university anywhere that would like to be in this kind of situation.
Despite the current crisis, many students still have confidence in their school. Junior Christopher Glenn is studying pre-law at Chicago State.
I plan on graduating from Chicago State. My entire the best part of my college career has came at Chicago State. I've really come to my own as a young man at this institution.
Senior Paris Griffin is the president of the Student Government Association.
We love our university, and so we believe that there's nowhere else that we can go that's going to provide the same amount of love and care as well as education that Chicago State provides to us.
The big concern here is if the university loses all its state funding.
After we go through this, the university will be still standing and will be standing strong.
You know, the Chicago State students have been demonstrating. They shut down the Dan Ryan Expressway, but when you talk to them, they're just very passionate about getting their education.
During that shutdown of the Dan Ryan, students staged a walkout, linking hands on the expressway. 2 weeks later, they protested outside Governor Rauner's office in Chicago. Griffin and Glenn have been at every one of the protests. They say they're fighting for their school.
CSU to me is home. To this community, it's the heart. If you take away this institution, the only real symbol of higher education on the south side of Chicago, what do you leave people with?
We're not fighting just for Chicago State, we're fighting for higher education in the state of Illinois, period.
We have students who are first generation trying to make a difference in the lives of their own lives and their families' lives, to become educated and become to become taxpayers and hold good jobs and create new jobs for others. And we don't seem to care too much about, the state doesn't seem to care too much of what it's doing to tens of thousands of students.
For Good Day DePaul, I'm Eleanor Lyon. And in another development, Chicago State officials say they are canceling spring break. This means the second semester will now end on April 30th instead of May 13th. The goal is to get the semester completed as soon as possible in case the university's money runs out. The University of Texas at Austin will allow handguns in classrooms. The school's president says he will abide by a new state law permitting the guns, even though he opposes the law. It allows licensed gun owners 21 and older to carry their weapons in class if they're fully concealed. That's all for this edition of Good Day DePaul. Thanks for watching. I'm Eleanor Lyon.